In a world where battlefields determine destinies and split-second decisions mean the difference between life and death, sometimes the most unexpected heroes emerge from the shadows. This is the story of how prejudice, courage, and skill collided in an operating room thousands of miles from home, forever changing the lives of everyone involved. The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Phoenix as General Marcus Rodriguez paced outside the medical tent, his weathered face etched with worry lines that had deepened over his 30-year military career. The sound of helicopter rotors still echoed in his ears from a medical evacuation that had just landed, carrying his most trusted officer and closest friend, Colonel James Mitchell. The explosion from the roadside bomb had been devastating, and the field medic's grim expressions told him everything he needed to know about the severity of the situation. Rodriguez had built his reputation on making tough decisions under pressure. But this felt different.
This was personal. Mitchell wasn't just another soldier under his command. He was the man who had saved Rodriguez's life during their first deployment together in Iraq, the godfather to his children, and the brother he had chosen rather than been born with.
Now Mitchell lay unconscious on a stretcher, his left leg mangled beyond recognition, multiple internal injuries threatening his life with each passing minute. The base's chief medical officer, Dr. Sarah Chen, approached him with the kind of measured urgency that medical professionals master after years of dealing with crisis situations. Her scrubs were already stained with blood, and exhaustion showed in her eyes despite the early hour.
The overnight casualties had been particularly heavy, stretching the medical team beyond their limits. "General, we need to discuss Colonel Mitchell's condition," she said, her voice steady but grave.
"The injuries are extensive. They tell us whether
we're dealing with severe trauma to his left leg, possible internal bleeding, and what appears to be significant damage to his abdominal organs. We've stabilized him for now, but he needs immediate surgical intervention."
Rodriguez stopped pacing and fixed her with the intense stare that had intimidated countless subordinates over the years. "Then operate. Do whatever it takes." Dr. Chen shook her head slowly.
"Sir, with respect, this is beyond our current capabilities here. The surgery required is extremely complex, involving multiple specialties. We need a trauma surgeon with extensive experience in reconstructive work, someone who has dealt with cases this severe. Our current surgical team, while competent, doesn't have the specialized training required for this level of complexity."
The general's jaw tightened. Throughout his career, he had never been one to accept limitations easily. Every obstacle was simply another problem to be solved, every challenge another opportunity to prove that determination and resources could overcome any adversity. The idea that his friend might die because of insufficient medical expertise was unacceptable.
"What are you telling me, doctor? That we just give up?
That we let a good man die because we don't have the right person?" His voice carried the edge that subordinates had learned to fear, but Dr. Chen had dealt with enough military brass to remain unfazed.
"No, sir. I'm telling you, we need to find the best trauma surgeon available and get them here immediately. We have maybe 6 to 8 hours before his condition becomes critical. The internal bleeding is controlled for now, but it won't stay that way."
"And the leg?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Without proper intervention, amputation will be the only option. And even then, survival isn't guaranteed."
Rodriguez turned away, staring across the compound where soldiers went about their morning routines, unaware of the drama unfolding in the medical section. In the distance, he could see the mountains that had claimed so many good soldiers, their peaks shrouded in the morning mist that would burn off as the day grew hotter.
Afghanistan had taken enough from him already. He wouldn't let it take Mitchell too. "Get me a list," he said finally, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to having his orders followed without question.
"I want every trauma surgeon within 1,000 miles. I want their credentials, their experience, their availability.
And I want it in the next hour."
Dr. Chen nodded, understanding the urgency. "Sir, I'll contact the medical command immediately. We'll reach out to every major medical facility in the region. If there's a surgeon capable of handling this case, we'll find them."
As she hurried away to begin making calls, Rodriguez remained outside the medical tent, listening to the steady beeping of machines keeping his friend alive. The sound was hypnotic and terrifying at the same time, each beep a reminder that Mitchell's life hung in the balance. He thought about all the missions they had shared, all the close calls they had survived together. Mitchell had always been the steady one, the voice of reason, when Rodriguez's temper threatened to get the better of him. Now it was Rodriguez's turn to be the steady one, to use every resource at his disposal to save his friend's life. The next hour passed with agonizing slowness. Rodriguez watched as Dr. Chen and her team worked the phones, reaching out to medical facilities across 3 countries. The responses were frustratingly similar. Their best surgeons were either unavailable, too far away, or lacked the specific expertise required for such a complex case. Each negative response felt like another nail in Mitchell's coffin.
Finally, Dr. Chen emerged from the communications tent, carrying a tablet with what appeared to be personnel files.
Her expression was cautiously optimistic, the first positive sign Rodriguez had seen all morning. "General, we may have found someone," she said, handing him the tablet.
Dr. Amanda Sterling, trauma surgeon at Bagram Airfield's main hospital. Her credentials are impressive. Top of her class at Johns Hopkins, residency at Massachusetts General, fellowship in trauma surgery and reconstructive medicine. She's dealt with cases similar to Colonel Mitchell's and has an exceptional success rate.
Rodriguez studied the information on the screen, noting the list of achievements, publications, and successful surgeries. Everything looked promising except for one detail that made him pause.
The photograph showed a young woman, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional style and intelligent eyes that seemed to look directly through the camera. "How old is she?" he asked, though the answer was already apparent from the photo. 32, sir. I know she looks young, but her experience is extensive. She's been working in combat medicine for 6 years, and her superiors give her the highest recommendations. She's available and can be here within 3 hours. Rodriguez frowned, his preconceptions warring with the desperation of the situation. In his mind, the best surgeons were seasoned veterans, older men with decades of experience and steady hands that had performed thousands of operations.
The idea of trusting Mitchell's life to someone who looked like she should still be in medical school didn't sit well with him. 32, he repeated, shaking his head.
"Doctor, I asked for your best surgeon, not someone who just finished training. Mitchell's life hangs in the balance here. We need someone with real experience, someone who has been doing this for 20, 30 years. Dr. Chen's expression remained professional, but there was a hint of frustration in her voice when she responded. "Sir, with respect, age doesn't always correlate with skill. Dr. Sterling has performed over 300 trauma surgeries in combat conditions. She's dealt with IED injuries, gunshot wounds, complex reconstructive cases. Her success rate is actually higher than many surgeons with twice her experience."
"But she's a woman," Rodriguez said, the words coming out before he could stop them. It wasn't that he was deliberately sexist, but his experience with combat medicine had been almost exclusively with male surgeons.
In his mental image of life-saving surgery, he saw strong, experienced men with steady hands and unshakable confidence. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Dr. Chen, herself a woman who had fought against similar prejudices throughout her career, chose her words carefully. "General, some of the finest surgeons I've worked with have been women. Dr. Sterling's gender has no bearing on her ability to save Colonel Mitchell's life." Rodriguez realized how his comment had sounded, but his concern for Mitchell overrode any consideration of political correctness.
"Look, I'm not trying to be difficult here. I just want the absolute best for Mitchell.
If this Dr. Sterling is truly our best option, then explain to me why I should trust her with my friend's life." Dr. Chen pulled up additional files on the tablet showing surgical outcomes, peer reviews, and detailed case studies. 3 months ago, Dr. Sterling performed a 12-hour surgery on a soldier who had stepped on an anti-personnel mine. The injuries were similar to Colonel Mitchell's: severe leg trauma, internal bleeding, multiple organ damage. Not only did she save his life, but she managed to preserve his leg with full functionality.
"The patient is back on active duty." She scrolled to another case.
6 months before that, she worked on a convoy driver who had been caught in a vehicle-borne IED explosion. Multiple trauma, burns, internal injuries. The patient was given a 5% chance of survival. Dr. Sterling spent 14 hours in surgery and saved his life. He's home with his family now, fully recovered. Rodriguez studied the case files, his military mind analyzing the data like a battlefield report. The statistics were impressive, undeniably so. Despite his reservations about her age and gender, the evidence was clear. Dr. Sterling had the skills and experience necessary to handle Mitchell's case.
"What's her availability?" he asked finally.
"She can be here in 3 hours, sir. I've already arranged for priority transport." Rodriguez looked back toward the medical tent where Mitchell lay fighting for his life.
3 hours felt like an eternity, but it was better than the alternative of having no qualified surgeon at all. His personal prejudices seemed petty when weighed against his friend's survival.
"Make the call," he said. "Get her here as fast as possible." As Dr. Chen hurried back to arrange the transport, Rodriguez remained outside, struggling with his conflicting emotions. Part of him still wished they could find an older, more experienced male surgeon, someone who fit his traditional expectations. But the rational part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through multiple deployments, recognized that his preconceptions might be getting in the way of saving Mitchell's life. The next 2 hours passed slowly as they monitored Mitchell's condition and prepared for Dr. Sterling's arrival. Rodriguez found himself pacing again, checking his watch every few minutes and growing more anxious as time passed. Dr. Shen provided regular updates on Mitchell's status, which remained stable but precarious. The internal bleeding was controlled, but the damage to his leg was severe, and infection was becoming an increasing concern. When the helicopter carrying Dr. Sterling finally appeared on the horizon, Rodriguez felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. This was the moment of truth, when he would meet the person in whom he was placing his friend's life. He had built up so many expectations and concerns that he wasn't sure what to expect when she actually arrived. The helicopter landed in a cloud of dust, and Rodriguez watched as a figure emerged from the aircraft. Even from a distance, he could see that Dr. Sterling moved with purpose and confidence, her medical bag in one hand and what appeared to be additional equipment in the other. She was smaller than he had expected, but there was something about her posture and stride that suggested competence and determination. As she approached the medical area, Rodriguez got his first clear look at Dr. Amanda Sterling. She was indeed young, as the photograph had indicated, with shoulder-length dark hair that had been pulled back into a practical ponytail for the flight. Her face was serious and focused, showing no sign of the nervousness or uncertainty that Rodriguez had half expected. She wore standard military medical fatigues that looked lived in rather than fresh from supply, suggesting real field experience. Dr. Chen met her at the helicopter landing zone, and Rodriguez could see them talking intensely as they walked toward the medical tent. Dr. Sterling was asking questions, taking notes and nodding as Dr. Inconman said. Chen provided details about Mitchell's condition. Even from a distance, Rodriguez could sense her professionalism and focus. When they reached the medical area, Dr. Chen made the introduction. General Rodriguez, this is Dr. Amanda Sterling. Dr. Sterling stepped forward and extended her hand, meeting Rodriguez's gaze directly. Her handshake was firm and confident, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that seemed to belie her youthful appearance. General, I understand you have a critically injured officer who needs immediate surgical intervention. I've reviewed the preliminary reports during the flight, and I'm ready to assess the patient and begin surgery as soon as possible. Rodriguez found himself somewhat taken aback by her directness and professionalism. He had expected someone more deferential, perhaps intimidated by his rank and the pressure of the situation. Instead, Dr. Sterling spoke to him as an equal, focused entirely on the medical emergency at hand rather than military protocol. Doctor, I want to be clear about something, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the weight of command. The man in there is more than just another patient to me. He's my friend, and I need to know that you understand the gravity of this situation. Dr. Sterling's expression didn't change, but there was a slight softening in her eyes that suggested understanding. General, every patient I treat is someone's friend, someone's family member. I don't take any life lightly, and I can assure you that Colonel Mitchell will receive the same level of care I would give to my own brother. The simple sincerity of her response caught Rodriguez off guard. He had been prepared for technical explanations or reassurances about her qualifications, but her personal commitment to treating Mitchell as family resonated with him in a way he hadn't expected. I need to examine the patient immediately, Dr. Sterling continued. Time is critical in cases like this, and every minute we delay increases the risk of complications. Rodriguez nodded and gestured toward the medical tent. Of course, Dr. Chen will fill you in on the details. As they entered the medical facility, Rodriguez hung back slightly, watching as Dr. Sterling approached Mitchell's bedside. Her entire demeanor changed as she shifted into medical mode, her movements becoming precise and economical as she began her examination. She spoke quietly to the nursing staff, asking specific questions about vital signs, medication, and the timeline of treatment since Mitchell's arrival. Rodriguez observed her technique as she carefully examined Mitchell's injuries, noting how gentle yet thorough she was. Her hands moved with practiced confidence as she assessed the damage, and he could see her mental wheels turning as she processed the information and began formulating a treatment plan. After several minutes of examination, Dr. Sterling stepped back and turned to address both Rodriguez and Dr. Chen. The injuries are severe but operable. The internal bleeding appears to be controlled, which gives us a good window for surgery. The leg damage is extensive, but I believe we can save it with some reconstructive work. I'll need to perform surgery immediately, and I estimate it will take between 8 and 12 hours depending on what we find once we get inside. Rodriguez felt a wave of relief wash over him. The confidence in her voice, the way she had taken charge of the situation, and her clear assessment of the challenges ahead, all helped to ease his earlier concerns about her age and experience. What do you need from me? He asked, I need you to trust me to do my job, Dr. Sterling replied simply. This is going to be a long surgery, and there may be moments when things look uncertain. I need to know that you won't interfere and that you'll let me focus on saving your friend's life.
The directness of her request surprised Rodriguez, but he respected her honesty.
You have my word, Doctor.
Mitchell's life is in your hands. Dr. Sterling nodded once, then turned back to her patient.
Then let's get started.
As the medical team began preparing for surgery, Rodriguez found himself facing a long wait filled with uncertainty and worry. But for the first time since Mitchell had been injured, he felt a cautious optimism. Despite his initial reservations, he was beginning to believe that Dr. Amanda Sterling might indeed be the right person to save his friend's life. The operating room had been transformed into a precision medical environment within 30 minutes of Dr. Sterling's arrival.
Rodriguez watched through the observation window as she worked with the surgical team, her movements efficient and purposeful as she prepared for what would undoubtedly be one of the most challenging operations of her career. The sterile lights cast harsh shadows across the room, creating an almost otherworldly atmosphere where life and death decisions would be made with surgical steel and steady hands.
Dr. Sterling had changed into surgical scrubs, her hair completely covered by a surgical cap, and her face partially hidden behind a mask.
But her eyes remained visible, and Rodriguez could see the intense concentration there as she reviewed the surgical plan one final time with her team. She moved around the operating table like a conductor preparing an orchestra, checking instruments, verifying blood supplies, and ensuring that every detail was perfect before making the first incision. The surgical team consisted of Dr. Chen, 2 experienced surgical nurses who had been flown in from Bagram, an anesthesiologist, and a specialist in vascular surgery who had arrived on the same helicopter as Dr.
Sterling. Each team member had been briefed on their role, and the coordination between them was already evident as they performed their final preparations. Rodriguez had been offered a chair in the observation area, but he found himself unable to sit still.
The waiting was torture, made worse by the knowledge that Mitchell's life hung in the balance just a few feet away, separated by a wall of glass and medical protocol. He had faced enemy fire, survived explosions, and made decisions that affected the lives of thousands of soldiers. But none of that had prepared him for the helplessness of watching someone else fight for his friend's life.
Dr. Sterling's voice came through the intercom as she addressed her team. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a complex trauma case with multiple injuries. Our primary goals are to control any remaining internal bleeding, repair the abdominal damage, and save the patient's left leg if possible. This is going to be a long surgery, so I need everyone to pace themselves and maintain focus throughout. If anyone needs a break, speak up immediately. There's no room for fatigue-induced errors today. Her voice carried an authority that seemed to fill the room, and Rodriguez could see the surgical team responding to her leadership. Even Dr. Chen, who outranked Dr. Force Sterling in the base hierarchy, deferred to her expertise without question. It was clear that in this operating room, Dr. Sterling was in complete command. The surgery began with Dr.
Sterling making a careful incision in Mitchell's abdomen. Rodriguez watched as she worked with meticulous precision, her hands steady and sure despite the complexity of the procedure.
Every movement was deliberate, every decision carefully considered. She spoke quietly to her team, explaining her actions and requesting specific instruments, with the calm confidence of someone who had performed similar operations hundreds of times.
First priority is identifying the source of internal bleeding, she said, her voice steady and professional. I can see evidence of damage to the small intestine and possibly the spleen.
Dr. Chen, I need better visibility in the lower quadrant. The hours began to pass slowly as Dr. Sterling worked through Mitchell's injuries systematically. Rodriguez found himself mesmerized by her technique, watching as she carefully repaired damaged tissue, sutured torn blood vessels, and methodically addressed each problem she encountered. Her hands moved with a precision that seemed almost mechanical, yet there was an artistry to her work that spoke to years of training and experience.
3 hours into the surgery, Dr. Sterling encountered the first major complication.
Rodriguez could see the tension in the room increase as monitors began beeping more urgently, and the surgical team's movements became more rapid and focused. We have bleeding from the hepatic artery, Dr. Sterling announced, her voice remaining calm despite the urgency of the situation. I need vascular clamps and surgical thread, smallest gauge available.
This is going to require microsurgery techniques. Rodriguez watched in fascination as Dr. Sterling worked to repair the damaged artery. Her movements became even more precise if that was possible, as she worked with blood vessels that were smaller than a pencil lead. The concentration required was enormous, and Rodriguez could see the sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool temperature in the operating room.
For 45 minutes, Dr. Sterling worked on the arterial repair while the rest of her team maintained support functions.
The room was silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and the quiet requests for instruments. Rodriguez found himself holding his breath as he watched her work, understanding instinctively that this was a critical moment in the surgery. Finally, Dr. Sterling stepped back slightly and nodded to her team.
Arterial repair complete, blood flow restored.
Let's check our other repairs and then move on to the leg.
The collective sigh of relief from the surgical team was audible even through the observation window. Rodriguez felt his own tension ease slightly as he realized they had successfully navigated the first major crisis.
But he knew the surgery was far from over, and the most challenging part was yet to come. The leg reconstruction represented an entirely different type of challenge. The explosion had caused massive damage to bone, muscle, and soft tissue, creating a complex puzzle that would require all of Dr. Sterling's skill and experience to solve.
Rodriguez watched as she carefully examined the extent of the damage, taking time to understand the full scope of what needed to be repaired before beginning work. The fibula is completely shattered, she explained to her team.
We have significant muscle damage in the gastrocnemius and soleus groups, and the anterior tibial artery has been severed. We're going to need bone grafts, vascular reconstruction, and extensive soft tissue repair. This is where we find out if we can save this leg. Rodriguez felt his stomach tighten as he heard the clinical description of Mitchell's injuries. The damage was even worse than he had imagined, and for the first time, he began to understand the true magnitude of what Dr. Sterling was attempting to accomplish.
The fact that she remained confident and focused in the face of such extensive damage impressed him more than he would have expected. The leg reconstruction began with Dr. Sterling carefully cleaning and debriding the damaged tissue, removing fragments of bone and foreign material that had been driven into the wound by the explosion. Her movements were deliberate and thorough, taking the time necessary to ensure that every piece of debris was removed before beginning the actual reconstruction work.
I need the bone reconstruction kit, she said. And Rodriguez watched as a nurse wheeled over a complex array of titanium rods, screws, and plates that would be used to rebuild Mitchell's shattered leg bone. The technology was impressive, but Rodriguez knew that all the advanced equipment in the world wouldn't help without skilled hands to use it properly.
Dr. Sterling began the painstaking process of rebuilding Mitchell's fibula using titanium hardware and bone grafts taken from his hip.
Rodriguez watched in amazement as she essentially reconstructed the bone from scratch, carefully aligning each fragment and securing it with surgical precision. The work required not only medical skill but also a kind of engineering expertise that Rodriguez had never fully appreciated before.
6 hours into the surgery, Dr. Sterling took her first real break, stepping back from the operating table and removing her surgical gloves.
Rodriguez could see the fatigue in her posture, but her movements remained sure and steady. When she spoke to her team, her voice still carried the same authority and confidence that had impressed him from the beginning.
We're making excellent progress, she announced. The abdominal repairs are holding well and the leg reconstruction is proceeding according to plan.
We still have several hours of work ahead of us, but I'm optimistic about the outcome. Let's take a 15-minute break to regroup and then we'll finish this. During the break, Dr. Sterling emerged from the operating room and approached the observation window, where Rodriguez had been keeping his vigil. Still wearing her surgical scrubs, she looked tired but determined, and when she spoke to him through the intercom, he could hear the confidence in her voice. General, I wanted to give you an update on your friend's condition. We've successfully repaired all the internal injuries and the leg reconstruction is going well.
Colonel Mitchell is stable and his vital signs are strong. We still have about 4 hours of work ahead of us, but I'm very optimistic about his recovery.
Rodriguez felt a wave of relief wash over him. Doctor, I have to ask, will he walk again? Dr. Sterling paused before answering, choosing her words carefully. The damage was extensive and he'll need months of physical therapy and rehabilitation. But yes, I believe he'll not only walk again but potentially return to active duty if that's what he chooses. We've been able to preserve all the major muscle groups and restore blood flow to the extremity. With proper rehabilitation, he should regain near normal function. The news was better than Rodriguez had dared to hope. When Mitchell had been brought in that morning, the possibility of amputation had seemed almost certain. Now, Dr. Sterling was telling him that not only would Mitchell keep his leg, but he might actually return to full duty. It seemed almost miraculous. Doctor, I owe you an apology, Rodriguez said, his voice heavy with emotion. When I first saw you, I had doubts. I let my preconceptions get in the way of recognizing your qualifications and expertise. You've proven me wrong in the best possible way. Dr. Sterling's eyes showed understanding and perhaps a hint of amusement. General, you're not the first person to have doubts about a young female surgeon. and you probably won't be the last.
What matters is that you trusted me to do my job when it counted. That takes courage, too.
As Dr. Sterling returned to the operating room to continue the surgery, Rodriguez found himself reflecting on the events of the day.
He had started the morning with clear ideas about what he expected from a military surgeon. Age, experience, and preferably someone who fit his traditional expectations. Dr. Sterling had challenged every one of those assumptions and proven that skill, dedication, and expertise mattered far more than any superficial characteristics. The final hours of surgery passed more smoothly than the earlier stages. With the major repairs completed, Dr. Sterling and her team focused on finishing the reconstruction work and ensuring that all the surgical sites were properly closed and protected. Rodriguez watched as she worked with the same meticulous attention to detail that had characterized her performance throughout the long day. The vascular reconstruction of Mitchell's leg required particularly delicate work, as Dr. Sterling reconnected the severed artery and restored blood flow to the lower extremity. Rodriguez could see the concentration on her face as she worked with blood vessels that were barely visible to the naked eye, using microsurgical techniques that seemed to border on the miraculous.
Blood flow is excellent, she announced after completing the vascular repair. Color is good, pulse is strong.
The leg is definitely viable. As the surgery entered its final phase, Dr.
Sterling began closing the various incision sites, working with the same careful precision that had characterized every aspect of the operation. Rodriguez could see that she was tired. They all were after nearly 10 hours in the operating room. But her hands remained steady and her focus unwavering.
Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Sterling stepped back from the operating table and began removing her surgical gloves. The monitors showed stable vital signs and Mitchell's breathing was strong and regular under the anesthesia. The surgery was complete. Ladies and gentlemen, excellent work today. Dr. Sterling addressed her team. This was a challenging case and everyone performed admirably. Colonel Mitchell is stable, and I expect him to make a full recovery.
The surgical team began the process of transferring Mitchell to the recovery area, where he would be monitored closely as he emerged from anesthesia. Rodriguez watched through the window as they carefully moved his friend, noting how peaceful Mitchell looked compared to the desperate condition he had been in that morning.
Dr. Sterling emerged from the operating room looking exhausted but satisfied. She had changed out of her surgical scrubs and back into her military fatigues, but there was something different about her appearance now. Rodriguez realized that his perception of her had changed completely over the course of the day. Where he had once seen youth and inexperience, he now saw skill and confidence. Where he had once questioned her abilities based on gender and age, he now recognized exceptional talent and dedication.
General, the surgery was successful, she reported formally. Colonel Mitchell's injuries have been repaired, and he should make a complete recovery. He'll need to remain here for several days for observation, and then he'll need to be transferred to a facility in Germany for the beginning of his rehabilitation program. But he's going to be fine.
Rodriguez felt emotions that he rarely allowed himself to experience in his professional role. Relief, gratitude, and admiration all washed over him as he realized that his friend was going to survive and recover fully. But there was also something else, a profound respect for the woman who had made it all possible. Dr.
Sterling, I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've given me back my friend, and you've done it with a level of skill that I've never seen before. I was wrong about you, and I'm man enough to admit it.
Dr. Sterling smiled for the first time that day, and Rodriguez could see the warmth and humanity behind the professional competence.
General, just make sure Colonel Mitchell follows his rehabilitation program. That's all the thanks I need.
As they stood outside the recovery area, Rodriguez found himself thinking about all the assumptions he had made and how thoroughly they had been proven wrong. Dr.
Amanda Sterling had not only met his expectations for the best possible surgeon, she had exceeded them in every way. Her age had proven to be an asset rather than a liability, bringing energy and modern techniques to the operating room. Her gender had been completely irrelevant to her surgical ability.
The sound of Mitchell stirring in the recovery room drew their attention. Rodriguez watched through the window as his friend's eyes fluttered open, still groggy from anesthesia but clearly conscious and responsive.
The relief that flooded through Rodriguez was overwhelming, and he had to steady himself against the wall as the full impact of the day's events hit him.
Doctor. Sterling checked her watch and gathered her medical bag. My transport back to Bagram leaves in an hour, she said.
Colonel Mitchell will be in excellent hands with Dr. Chen and her team. I'll send detailed post-operative instructions and will be available by radio if any complications arise. As she prepared to leave, Rodriguez realized that this remarkable woman would simply disappear back to her regular duties,
probably to save other lives with the same skill and dedication she had shown today. The thought that he might never see her again seemed wrong somehow after what they had shared. "Doctor," he called as she headed toward the helicopter landing area.
If you ever need anything at all, you call me personally. You have my word on that.
"Doctor."
Sterling turned back and gave him one final smile. Just take care of your friend, General.
And maybe next time don't be so quick to judge a surgeon by their appearance. Rodriguez watched as the helicopter carrying Dr. Kama. Sterling disappeared into the distance, taking with it one of the most remarkable people he had ever met. The woman who had walked through his door that morning in response to his demand for the best surgeon available had proven to be exactly that, in ways he never could have imagined when he first saw her young face and questioned her qualifications.
3 months after Dr. Sterling had walked out of his life as suddenly as she had entered it, General Rodriguez found himself standing in the rehabilitation center in Landstuhl, Germany, watching his friend take his first independent steps since the bombing.
Colonel Mitchell moved slowly and deliberately, using a walking cane for support, but he was walking. The doctors had initially predicted months of wheelchair dependency, possibly permanent disability, but Mitchell's recovery had exceeded every expectation.
"You know, Marcus, I keep thinking about that surgeon," Mitchell said as they sat together in the rehabilitation center's garden. His voice was stronger now, though he still tired easily from the extensive physical therapy sessions.
I never got to thank her properly. I was unconscious when she arrived and barely coherent when she left. But everyone keeps telling me that she literally saved my life and my leg. Rodriguez nodded, watching as other wounded soldiers worked with their physical therapists on the lawn around them. The scene was both inspiring and heartbreaking, a reminder of the human cost of their mission and the dedication of the medical professionals who worked to put these men and women back together.
Dr. Amanda Sterling, he said. I'll never forget her name or what she did for you. For both of us, really.
Tell me again what happened, Mitchell requested. It had become something of a ritual between them, this retelling of the surgery day. Rodriguez suspected it helped Mitchell process the fact that he had come so close to death and permanent disability.
I asked for the best surgeon they could find, Rodriguez began, settling into the familiar story. When they told me they had found someone, I had certain expectations about what that person would look like. He's assassinated.
Dr. Sterling challenged every single one of those expectations the moment she stepped through the door.
Mitchell smiled, knowing what was coming next.
"And you doubted her because she was young and female."
"I did," Rodriguez admitted without shame.
Over the past 3 months, he had become comfortable acknowledging his initial prejudices and how thoroughly wrong they had proven to be. I looked at her and saw inexperience instead of expertise. I saw gender instead of skill. It's a mistake I'll never make again.
The rehabilitation center had become a second home to Rodriguez over the past few weeks as Mitchell progressed through the final stages of his recovery. The general had taken leave from his command to be present for his friend's rehabilitation, something that had surprised many of his colleagues but which Rodriguez considered a necessary priority.
Mitchell had saved his life years ago. Being present for Mitchell's recovery seemed like the least he could do in return. Doctors says, Hans Weber, the German orthopedic surgeon overseeing Mitchell's rehabilitation, had been impressed by the quality of the surgical work performed in Afghanistan. This Dr. Sterling, she must be very experienced, he had said during one of their consultations. The reconstruction work is extraordinary. I have seen many similar cases, and few surgeons could have achieved this level of functional restoration. Praise from Dr. Weber, who was considered one of Europe's leading trauma specialists, had reinforced Rodriguez's growing appreciation for Dr. Sterling's abilities. What had seemed like a desperate gamble on that terrible morning in Afghanistan had actually been the placement of Mitchell in the hands of one of the finest surgeons in military medicine. As the weeks passed and Mitchell's recovery continued, Rodriguez found himself thinking more and more about Dr.
Sterling and the brief time she had spent at their base. Her professionalism, her skill, and her quiet confidence had left a lasting impression that went beyond gratitude for Mitchell's recovery.
She had challenged his assumptions about leadership, competence, and what it meant to be the best at your profession. One afternoon, as Rodriguez was reviewing his emails in the family lounge of the rehabilitation center, he received a message that made him sit up with surprise.
The sender was Dr. Amanda Sterling, and the subject line read, "Following up on Colonel Mitchell's recovery." Rodriguez opened the email with interest, wondering what had prompted her to reach out after 3 months of silence.
The message was characteristically professional and to the point. General Rodriguez, I hope this message finds you well.
I wanted to follow up on Colonel Mitchell's progress and ensure that his recovery is proceeding according to expectations. I have been reviewing his case files with his rehabilitation team and am pleased to see that he is exceeding all projected milestones. I will be in Germany next week for a medical conference and wondered if it would be possible to visit Colonel Mitchell and assess his progress personally. Please let me know if this would be acceptable. Respectfully, Dr.
Amanda Sterling. Rodriguez stared at the email for several minutes, surprised by the wave of anticipation he felt at the prospect of seeing Dr. Sterling again. Over the past months, she had taken on an almost mythical quality in his mind. The skilled professional who had appeared at exactly the right moment and performed what seemed like a miracle. The idea of seeing her again, under less desperate circumstances, was unexpectedly appealing. He quickly typed a response. Dr. Sterling, your visit would be most welcome. Colonel Mitchell has spoken often of wanting to thank you personally for saving his life. We would be honored to have you assess his progress. I will arrange for you to have full access to his medical files and rehabilitation records. When would be convenient for you? Her reply came within the hour. I will be available this Saturday afternoon if that works for your schedule. I look forward to seeing Colonel Mitchell's progress firsthand. Rodriguez immediately began making arrangements for Dr. Sterling's visit, though he found himself uncharacteristically nervous about the prospect. During their previous encounter, the desperate nature of the medical emergency had overshadowed any personal considerations. Now, meeting under normal circumstances, he wondered how their interaction would differ. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for Germany in late fall. Rodriguez had spent more time than usual on his appearance that morning, though he told himself it was simply out of respect for Dr. Sterling's professional visit. He arrived at the rehabilitation center early to ensure that everything was prepared for her assessment of Mitchell's progress. Mitchell was equally excited about the prospect of finally meeting the surgeon who had saved his life. His physical therapy session that morning had gone particularly well, and he was eager to demonstrate his progress to the woman responsible for his recovery. When Dr. Sterling arrived at the rehabilitation center, Rodriguez was struck by how different she seemed in civilian clothes. During their previous encounter, she had been either in military fatigues or surgical scrubs, focused entirely on the medical emergency at hand. Now, wearing a professional but casual outfit, she seemed more approachable, and, Rodriguez had to admit, quite attractive in a way that he hadn't noticed during the crisis situation. General Rodriguez, she said, extending her hand in greeting. It's good to see you again under much better circumstances. Dr. Sterling, thank you for coming. Mitchell is very excited to meet you properly and show you how well he's recovered. They made their way to Mitchell's room, where Rodriguez's friend was waiting with obvious anticipation. When Dr. Sterling entered the room, Mitchell attempted to stand from his chair, though Rodriguez could see that the effort still caused him some discomfort. Colonel Mitchell. Dr. Sterling said warmly, please don't get up on my account. I'm here to see how you're doing, not to put you through unnecessary stress. Ma'am, I've been waiting 3 months to thank you properly, Mitchell said, his voice filled with emotion. The doctors tell me that without your surgery I would have lost my leg and possibly my life. I owe you everything. Dr. Sterling's professional demeanor softened slightly at Mitchell's obvious gratitude. Colonel, seeing you recover like this is all the thanks I need. You've clearly worked very hard in your rehabilitation, and it shows. May I examine your leg and assess your range of motion? What followed was a comprehensive examination that demonstrated Dr. Sterling's thoroughness and attention to detail. She carefully assessed Mitchell's mobility, tested his strength and flexibility, and reviewed his rehabilitation records with the same meticulous precision that Rodriguez remembered from the surgery day.
This is remarkable progress,
she said finally. Your range of motion is better than I dared hope for after seeing the initial damage. Have you been cleared to return to active duty?
Mitchell's face lit up at the question.
Not yet, but the doctors say it's a possibility if I continue progressing at this rate. I never thought I'd have the chance to serve again after that explosion. Dr. Tretzoff. Sterling smiled, and Rodriguez could see genuine pleasure in her expression at Mitchell's recovery. Well, based on what I see today, I think you have an excellent chance of returning to full duty if that's what you choose. The surgical repairs have held up beautifully and your rehabilitation progress is exceptional. After completing her examination of Mitchell, Dr. Sterling accepted Rodriguez's invitation to join him for coffee in the center's cafe. It was the first time they had been alone together since the day of the surgery, and Rodriguez found himself curious about the woman behind the professional competence he had witnessed. Dr. Sterling, may I ask you something personal? Rodriguez said as they settled into a quiet corner of the cafe. Of course, General.
What would you like to know? How do you handle the pressure? That day with Mitchell, you were so calm and confident, even when complications arose. I've commanded soldiers in combat situations, and I recognize that kind of grace under pressure. But surgery seems different somehow, more personal.
Doctor, Sterling considered the question carefully before answering. I suppose it comes from years of training and experience, but also from a deep belief in what I'm doing.
When I'm in that operating room, nothing else exists except the patient and the surgical challenge. The pressure actually helps me focus because I know that someone's life depends on my performance.
Have you always known you wanted to be a surgeon? Actually, no, she said with a slight smile. I originally planned to go into pediatrics. But during my rotations in medical school, I discovered that I had a talent for surgery and found trauma medicine particularly challenging and rewarding. Every case is different. Every surgery presents unique problems to solve.
It's intellectually stimulating in a way that I find addictive. Rodriguez found himself fascinated by this glimpse into Dr. Sterling's background and motivations. The woman who had seemed so focused and professional during the crisis had depth and complexity that he was only now beginning to appreciate. What about you, General? Have you always been in the military? Since I was 18, Rodriguez replied. It's been my whole adult life. I've never really known anything else. Sometimes I wonder what I'll do when it's time to retire, but that still seems far away. They talked for over an hour, covering topics ranging from their respective careers to their views on leadership and responsibility. Rodriguez found Dr. Sterling to be intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that emerged as she became more comfortable in the conversation. She was well-read and had interests beyond medicine, including history and classical music. As their conversation continued, Rodriguez realized that his initial attraction to Dr. Sterling went beyond professional respect. There was something about her combination of competence and femininity that he found deeply appealing. She was clearly a strong, independent woman who had succeeded in a demanding field. Yet she maintained a warmth and approachability that drew him in. Sterling, he said as their conversation began to wind down, I hope you won't think this is inappropriate, but I would very much like to see you again when you're not here on professional business. Would you consider having dinner with me sometime?
Doctor.
Sterling looked surprised by the question, and for a moment Rodriguez worried that he had overstepped professional boundaries. But then she smiled, and he could see consideration in her eyes. General, I have to admit that I find you interesting as well, she said carefully. But I want to be clear that our professional relationship and my medical responsibilities always come first. If we were to see each other personally, it would have to be with the understanding that my career and my patients will always be my primary priority.
I wouldn't expect anything less, Rodriguez replied.
In fact, your dedication to your profession is one of the things I admire most about you. Dr. Sterling nodded slowly. In that case, yes, I would like to have dinner with you. I'm based at Bagram, but I travel frequently for consultations and conferences. Perhaps we can find a time when our schedules align. As they exchanged contact information, Rodriguez felt a sense of anticipation that he hadn't experienced in years.
The woman who had saved his best friend's life had proven to be not only professionally impressive but personally fascinating as well. 6 months later, Rodriguez found himself standing in the same rehabilitation center garden where he and Mitchell had spent so many afternoons discussing Dr.
Sterling and the surgery that had saved Mitchell's life, but this time Dr. Sterling was with them, no longer the mysterious surgeon who had appeared in their moment of crisis, but Amanda, the woman who had become an important part of Rodriguez's life.
Mitchell had indeed returned to active duty, his recovery so complete that he was now serving as an instructor at the Army's Advanced Tactical Training Center.
His limp was barely noticeable, and he had regained full strength and mobility in his leg. The doctors considered his case a textbook example of successful trauma surgery and rehabilitation.
You know, Amanda, Mitchell said as they walked through the garden together, I still think about that day sometimes. Not the explosion or the pain, but waking up and realizing that I was going to be okay.
That I wasn't going to be disabled or dependent on others for the rest of my life. You gave me back my future. Amanda squeezed Rodriguez's hand as they walked. Over the months, their relationship had deepened from professional respect to personal affection to something that looked very much like love. They had navigated the challenges of a long-distance relationship, demanding careers, and the complexities of military life. But they had found in each other a partnership that strengthened both of them. James, you gave yourself back your future, Amanda replied. I performed the surgery, but you did the hard work of recovery and rehabilitation. You earned your return to active duty through determination and effort. Rodriguez watched the exchange between his friend and the woman he loved, marveling at how their lives had become intertwined through that desperate day in Afghanistan. What had started as a medical emergency had evolved into something much more profound, a challenge to his preconceptions, a demonstration of the power of skill and dedication over prejudice and assumption, and ultimately a love story that none of them could have predicted.
As they continued their walk through the garden, Rodriguez reflected on how much his understanding of leadership, competence, and worth had changed since that morning when he had demanded the best surgeon available. Dr. Amanda Sterling had walked through his door and challenged every assumption he had made about what the best looked like. In doing so, she had not only saved Mitchell's life but had opened Rodriguez's eyes to the dangers of prejudice and the importance of looking beyond surface characteristics to recognize true excellence. The general who had once doubted a young female surgeon had become a man who had learned to appreciate skill, dedication, and competence wherever he found them. And in the process, he had found not only a deeper understanding of what it meant to be truly professional, but also a love that had enriched his life in ways he had never imagined possible. The story that had begun with an explosion and a desperate request for medical help had evolved into something much more meaningful, a testament to the power of expertise over prejudice, skill over assumptions, and ultimately, the ability of extraordinary people to change lives in ways that extend far beyond their original mission. Dr. Amanda Sterling had indeed been the best surgeon available that day, in ways that General Rodriguez was still discovering months later.